a lot of companies and the leadership, they just want visibility into what's working and they want to be able to make decisions. So when they can actually do that and they have reliable data, it's a lot of work to get to that. There's a lot of processes and tech and a lot of kind of complexities you have to work through just to get reliable reporting. When they have that and they haven't had it, I mean, it's a game changer. They can actually make decisions.
You're listening to RevOps Champions, a podcast created for B2B leaders to help you align your people, streamline your processes, trust your data, and leverage technology in order to grow your business. We're your hosts, Brendan Denewell
and Amy Weaver. Well, Charlie, thank you so much for joining us today. We're happy to have you on RevOps Champions. You were invited here because I saw the work that you and Chrissy and Xander are doing on your own podcast and the activity that you're sharing on LinkedIn. And I think maybe just to give our listeners some context as to who you are and what CS2 does, you could do a quick intro for us, and then we can launch into the really good stuff.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, thanks for having me. So I'm Charlie Saunders. I'm the CRO and one of the co-founders of CS2. We're a go-to-market ops, marketing ops, RevOps, whatever your favorite ops. I know we're going to talk about that today. Ops consulting practice. We've been around. We're coming up into our 10th year. Been at this a long time now. Worked in-house at a couple of B2B SaaS companies prior to that. All of our clients are in the B2B SaaS space and helping them through their typically pre-IPO stages all the way through as they grow, gearing up towards IPO, building a lot of their tech infrastructure out, getting their data in order, training their team, enabling their team. So a lot of work, very, very busy, kind of helping our clients, and looking forward to this chat today.
Yeah,
thanks for having me.
Absolutely.
Yeah, awesome.
So the first thing that I'd like to get into is where you guys have landed, or if you guys have landed, on whether you think what you're helping your clients with is their revenue operations or their go-to-market operations or some other acronym that we could use to kind of distill it down into something small.
Yeah, so I think, we've been debating this a lot, and I think a lot of the debate stemmed from, I don't want to say failure of revenue ops, but I don't feel like the promise of revenue ops has really lived up to the hype and the potential. Obviously, everyone wanted to go down this path to centralize all of the ops teams, get them to work together, get alignment, and the promise was that alignment would lead to a lot of great business outcomes. We'd be able to build together, all of the teams have shared priorities, and everything's going to work better. But there's a lot of downsides and issues that we see across our clients and other companies we speak to, where RevOps in reality was just a rebranded sales ops. And some of our background, for us, particular for CS2, we kind of grew up in marketing ops, right? So my co-founder, Chrissy, ran marketing ops at Marketo before CS2. We started CS2 as a marketing ops consulting practice, and then we started doing a lot more Salesforce work and kind of delving more into what might be considered sales ops or customer success ops or in general RevOps. So when we started doing more of that, you started working with more of like the RevOps team, and they didn't really understand the marketing ops side, or they were just the leader of the revenue ops team is just a sales ops person who got promoted into the revenue ops. So when coming from the marketing ops side, it just got completely deprioritized. And you would see time after time, the marketing leader get pretty upset because all of their marketing ops priorities would be deprioritized because the revenue ops team was focused on the end of the funnel work, just the true like revenue, like CPQ, the deal desk, helping the sales team, and then the marketing team got deprioritized. So we saw that over and over again. So for years we've been talking about this, saying, okay, if you're going to be revenue ops, please don't forget about marketing ops, but it just still happens over and over again. And then the other side of it was marketing ops has really grown up a lot over the last few years, or even the last decade since we've really been at this. Where in the past, a lot of people thought, okay, you're marketing ops, you're just sending emails out of Marketo and HubSpot. But now, it's very technical work. We're integrating like 50 tools. We're doing a lot of work in Salesforce, a lot of analytics work and analyst work. And so but the perception still for some people for marketing ops is still not where it should be, or it's not where the real like true, sophisticated practitioners are at nowadays. So we started to explore this option. Okay, well, revenue ops isn't working. Marketing ops kind of needs to evolve into something else. Is go-to-market ops a good way to frame all of this? And the final thing I would say, until I pause for a second, is that the other side of it is marketing ops does a lot more than operationalize marketing, right? They're operationalizing all the go-to-market strategies, and we see that across like ABM, demand gen, sales outbound, partner, customer expansion, and that's not only kind of owned by sales or customer success in some of those cases. Marketing ops is taking full ownership over that, or at least a lot of the marketing ops people that we're working with are. So then, if we're owning all the go-to-market strategies, we're doing a lot more than just sending emails. Like it felt like marketing ops needed a rebrand. We're kind of still very got nuanced opinions on whether this is the best way for internal teams to operate, that we can get into in a second. But that's a lot of where this debate has stemmed from over the last year or so.
Interesting. Really interesting to hear the, renamed sales ops person as RevOps. I can absolutely see it happening, but it's not something that has come up with any of our guests yet so far.
Yeah, I'd say I would agree. It hasn't happened with any of our guests, but we've seen it on the client side when we've seen someone at one of our clients, their title changed to something related to revenue ops, and we were like, oh, that's interesting. And then you realize that in fact they were actually a sales ops leader or something, or in some cases, I must say, we've also seen senior marketing people move into that role, which might be encouraging. Yeah, and I guess part of what I'd like to sort of dig into, Charlie, over the next half hour or so is the differences between your sort of target audience, which are B2B SaaS, and our target audiences, which is different, which is B2B professional services. Because a lot of the terms we're talking about, of course, are far more familiar to the SaaS world. One of the struggles that we have is that in professional services firms, they don't necessarily resonate with any of these terms because and interestingly or ironically, it's because their go-to-market is very different to a SaaS business. So that's something I'd like to unpack as much as we can today, and then of course maybe in subsequent conversations, because I think there's so many things that mid-sized professional services firms. So for example, architecture, engineering, construction, otherwise known as AEC industries, is an audience that we love to work with, but they're also known to be fairly traditional in their GTM, which I don't even use that term. But we see so many things that we've learned through the SaaS world that they could really adopt and be really successful at, starting with metrics. Like we know so many SaaS companies where core metrics are things like LTV and CAC, which you mentioned that to a lot of professional services firms, and they're like, "What are you talking about?" But when you really start digging in, they're like, oh my gosh, that's actually those are really powerful metrics that we could actually measure, and maybe they should be, key metrics for us. Anyhow, so that's kind of a more of a side note, but just to sort of start painting that picture, and you probably have visibility into this, but just something I'd like to sort of revisit as we're chatting is, what are some of the differences from a go-to-market and RevOps perspective between SaaS and professional services, and what are the things that they could potentially learn from each other? Most likely professional services learning from SaaS.
Perfect. Yeah. Well, I know a lot more on the SaaS side than the professional services, although we are a professional services company ourselves, obviously.
Yes. But, and I think, Charlie, that's actually a really good angle to look at this from, because you're the CRO at your company, and you guys have marketing ops professionals, I would imagine. So are you guys internally separating out? You have the folks that are sales ops focused, the folks that are marketing ops focused. CS. How are you?
I mean, we're a small agency, right? So we're under 20 people. So we don't have we have internal operations that helps a lot more with our just client onboarding. But when it comes to kind of our own go-to-market compared to our clients, it is still pretty different, right? We also don't need the same volume, or we don't, one bit of background of us, most of our clients are on long-term retainers, right? So we don't need to be having like a big volume play. We don't need to be having kind of like core funnel metrics to be able to start operationalizing all of the different go-to-market strategies to be able to get enough interest to be able to convert that through the funnel and convert into customers, because we don't have the same demands as a SaaS company that is trying to kind of infinitely scale, because they just need to get more customers, and they don't. For us to get more customers, we need more people. So it's a very different kind of demands from the business when it comes to the go-to-market side. But yeah, definitely see that there's a lot that both sides could probably learn from each other for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's interesting, and you're right, because we're obviously in the same boat as you are from that perspective. And I guess one other thing we can talk about is, was it very clear to you from the beginning that B2B SaaS would be your focus, or did you consider other verticals?
So we came out from B2B SaaS companies, right? Like I said, my co-founder, who's also my wife, Chrissy, she used to work at Marketo, which is one of the big marketing automation vendors out there. Then she went on to a company where we met, a company called Jive, was another B2B SaaS company. So it's just where we've had our whole career. So I think the thing about B2B SaaS that's really interesting to us is that these companies, they grow really fast, right? So they're going through maybe doubling, trying to triple in size every year, particularly at the stages where we're working with them, both from an ARR perspective, headcount perspective. So they're always in this kind of insane build mode, which is where we really like to play, right? We're coming in and we're helping build out all of this infrastructure from the ground up, or they've already got some way through their growth stages and they've done it all wrong when it comes to setting up the CRM and marketing automation and all the tools. So we're coming in and we're stripping out and we're kind of pulling out a lot of what they've built and resetting the foundation. So but there's a lot of there's like so much runway in terms of what needs to be done because of the amount of growth they're trying to go through, that it then is an interesting challenge for us to be able to work on that. And I think because of those relatively unique demands from that type of industry, I'm a big believer in positioning yourself to become an expert in that vertical. Because probably like you guys find with going after your verticals, there's so much kind of nuance and ways to service those type of clients that you can become the expert in. So we're not looking particularly to be an expert in every vertical. Like, we're always going to focus on SaaS. We have for the last 10 years. I don't see that ever changing. And it wasn't even a debate at the beginning. It was like, this is just the industry that we're from. We also live in the Bay Area, so we're kind of surrounded by all the companies here. So it makes a lot of sense.
And you said earlier that your focus is on pre-IPO SaaS businesses, but what is the sweet spot size wise for you, whether it's a revenue size or an employee size?
So from a revenue size, most of our clients are probably not under 5 million ARR. And I don't think many are over probably like 400, 500 million. But that's a pretty wide
range, yeah.
Range, right? I would say our best clients are the ones that they, like I've mentioned, they are trying to actually build out kind of a foundation to grow on. They have a few operations people in-house that are so busy with the day-to-day that they need to bring in experts to really help them build kind of the core components and that core piece of the foundation. A lot of times we get brought in by a new CMO that's coming in, and they come in and they go, okay, I want to make some decisions. Where's my data? And everyone's like, what data? Like, we don't have good data. So then the CMO goes, okay, I need to get this pretty soon. Otherwise I'm going to get fired in like 3 months because I can't make any decisions. And then, we get brought in, and we have a lot of relationships with previous CMOs that we've worked with. So they'll bring us in and we'll kind of help the team get what they need from a data and architecture point of view.
So would you say, going back to kind of the questions that I sent you before this, would you say there are some common traits with the teams who have kind of figured out this rapid growth scale situation, and then ones that are really struggling and maybe hitting lots of roadblocks along the way?
The first one I think is when you start, because I think for companies that leave it too late to start actually investing in operations, they're the companies that really feel the pain. And the reason why is because that is the exact reason that I just talked about. When you're, a few couple million ARR or even earlier, you don't have as much, executives on your team or much pressure to have, the data and the answers to the questions and really try and have that view into what's working and what's not working. The pressure from the board on, okay, what ROI are you getting from all of these channels, right? So then at that point, they're not investing. They often don't invest as much in building out the infrastructure that's going to give them the data that's going to help them have the analytics they need to make better decisions. But then what happens is they get used to that and they kind of don't invest enough as they grow. And then they hit the scale where now they're, 50 million or 100 million ARR, they've got a CMO, and they're trying to answer some really complicated questions about where to invest their money, but they still don't have the ability to answer those questions. And then they try and implement, what we're trying to implement for our clients and try and build out that foundation. But by the time they've got to that scale, they have so much tech debt. They've had so many fingers in the systems. There's so much like automation in there. There's so much bad data that the time it takes to build what they need to get the CMO or get the marketing leadership or CRO what they need is now, it's going to take like 6 months or a year compared to if you had done it, a couple of years earlier, you could have built the foundation for scale in a month. So I think the companies that it's really setting themselves up for success is the key part, and it's tough because most companies don't. I mean, it's great for our business because we have to come in and kind of save them and and help them out. But I do wish companies would realize this because it's just a pattern that just repeats over and over and over again.
Charlie, what would you say are the 2 or 3 big reasons that companies don't figure this out earlier?
I mean, operations is kind of abstract, and I think most CEOs at that stage, when they're thinking about allocating their budget, they're not going, I need like marketing ops and rev ops or go to market ops, a good team and consultants in here like building this out. It's not cheap, right? So they're investing in their product, they're investing in maybe hiring their sales team, they're doing probably the right things at that time. But the problem is the operations side just doesn't get fully invested in as it should. And then by the time they need it, by the time they need that foundation, they don't have it. So now they're playing catch up. So I don't think anyone's doing anything maliciously or even really making like a completely wrong decision in that moment. But I do think that if they were making the perfect decision, the most optimal decision, they'd be siphoning off a bit more budget for the operations team. I mean, how many like relatively big sized companies are there out there with just like one marketing ops person? It's just insane to me. And then back to the go to market ops, or one of the reasons why revenue ops has kind of maybe not lived up to the hype is that most of these companies that just have one revenue ops person. I mean, if you only have one revenue ops person, no marketing ops, no other ops, it's one ops person. What are they going to do? They're going to help the sales team, right? They're not going to be in Marketo and HubSpot helping the marketing team. They're not going to be helping the customer success team. They're going to be deal desk helping the sales team.
Yeah, well, the
So
sales leader is going to make sure that they are, for sure.
Exactly. So that's another reason. Like, is that revenue ops? Like the definition that we're all hoping revenue ops is, or is that just rebranded sales ops? That's just rebranded sales ops, right? And the problem is that scales even as the team grows on the ops side.
So so of course a lot of it does depend on the makeup of the team. So again, ideally, if there were a marketing ops person or team, sales ops person or team, CS person or team, then having someone sitting in a rev ops seat, they're essentially enabling all 3 of those teams. That's really the goal. But to your point, if there's only one person, then as always, sales will get priority.
Yeah, but even when you have the bit, I've heard time and time again, even if you've got a RevOps leader, and I'm not hating on RevOps so much, I'm probably sound like I am, but when you've got the RevOps leader and you have marketing ops, sales ops, etc., even if you have a bigger team, the priorities still shift towards revenue, aka sales. And then the problem is that, I mean, I've been involved in clients, I don't want to call any out by name, where the CMO has, and someone even commented this on one of my posts the other day on LinkedIn, the CMO's had to kind of like create a massive storm of chaos to try and pull back the ops team out of the revenue ops team into the marketing org, because they weren't getting anywhere near of what they need from the CMO or marketing leadership perspective. And I do want to say that it doesn't mean that this never works. There are definitely orgs out there where they figured out the alignment piece, but in my experience, revenue ops has been around for like maybe half a decade now, or longer, like kind of in this form of it. It isn't kind of the golden ticket to getting the ops teams to work in the most optimal way. And that's actually where I've kind of landed on the go-to-market ops side. I don't think there is an internal team structure that is the most optimal, whether that's go-to-market ops, revenue ops, distributed ops teams. I think every company kind of has to figure out what's the right solution for them. And it's probably going to change over the years. Like when you're smaller, it's going to be in a certain way. As you get bigger, once you're, several hundred million ARR, like there's probably going to be even pressure from like the IT team to get involved and maybe strip away some of the responsibilities there. And it's going to, our perspective from CS2 is now focusing less on trying to tell companies like, this is the way to set up your ops team. It's actually trying to help our clients specifically figure it out for them. But then from a go-to-market ops point of view, we still see ourselves as go-to-market ops, as CS2. But that doesn't mean that every other company out there has to do it. But we see go-to-market operations as more the deliverable that the operations teams should be trying to build. So this go-to-market operationalization, it's like making sure that you've got each go-to-market strategy operationalized, not siloed. You've got a unified way that each go-to-market strategy is being operationalized. You have unified data to compare them against each other. You're enabling all of the teams in the right way. So for us, go-to-market ops has now kind of evolved to what we build for clients and less about a team structure dynamic that we're trying to force onto any company.
Yeah, and I think, ultimately, if you think about it, the reason that we and so many others have come to this dilemma is because we're just trying to name something that is really the alignment of people, process, data, and technology or systems, right? So I think ultimately, when you're having a conversation, our own go to market thing is we'll park that for a second, because obviously part of what we both have to do as business in our businesses is generate, even though it's not as many leads as SaaS companies, we need to generate leads. So we need to tell them really what it is that we do. But calling it RevOps or GTM ops isn't necessarily going to attract a whole bunch of the right people, because really what they're feeling are the obstacles that come from misalignment between the communication between their marketing, sales, and CS teams, or the lack of clarity around the data or the metrics between those teams, or the handoff of the processes from one team to the next and all the way around from CS back to marketing, etc. And then, of course, the technology that ties it all together. So that's really what I think what you're doing and what we're doing. Ultimately, what we call it matters, but it doesn't really matter as much. We just have to make sure that we're meeting, the client where they are and solving the issue. So because I'm sure you see things the same way that we do, which is when we start working with a client, often the big initial lift is either in marketing or sales or CS. It's very, very seldom that we're going to attack all three simultaneously. And so we'll typically start with one team, so the sales team or the marketing team or the CS team. And then once we've got them all set up and trained and what have you, then we'll move on to the next team. But knowing that the sort of longer term goal, the sort of the 3-year roadmap, is that ultimately they're all going to be, integrated, and so that the alignment is happening. Does that resonate with you?
It does. The one thing I will say though is, so typically when we're starting our engagements, we're not really going from one team to the next. So when we think of go-to-market operations, kind of in our definition, and by the time this podcast comes out on our website, we're going to detail it out a lot more, and we've got some images and stuff. But it does, the actual kind of operational process, when you think about kind of capturing demand, processing the data through all of your systems, handing off to sales, getting the sales process working in a particular way so that you have a repeatable sales process, you can't do that only working with marketing or only working with sales. So like one of the first engagements that we always do is helping them build out the full funnel tracking and operations throughout that full life cycle. And you have to involve marketing, sales, SDR, customer success, but particularly if you're doing like a big customer expansion play. And that's where go-to-market operations is key, because we're not just operationalizing everything for the marketing team to just like get an MQL count, or we're not just operationalizing everything for the sales team to just handle their opportunities. You need the full system to be working in unison and a unified approach to be able to understand that full life cycle, and then multiple life cycles, because you could have a partner play going on at the same time as well, and sales outbound and marketing inbound and ABM and customer expansion. And we're trying to coordinate all of that in a way and get a data model and a process that we can unify, so every team is working in a similar way. And then when we pull our reports, you can report on sales outbound and demand gen and customer expansion and partner in the same reporting infrastructure, as opposed to going with each team and pulling opportunity reports to do for sales, and marketing is just doing lead reports, and partners just using their partner portal, and customer success is just only looking at renewal ops. It's like we're trying to unify that. So there is going to be kind of like some projects where we are working with distinct teams, but usually the first thing that we're doing is actually trying to unify the teams into a common approach.
Yes, absolutely. So, I mean, yeah, I guess I skipped over that part, which of course comes back to what you were saying earlier. So, which is when we're in the sales process with our prospective clients, it really, one of the first things we're trying to get to is, what are the core reports that you need as a leadership team to be successful? That then tells us, how much marketing and sales and CS have to, have what their parts are to play in that. And it's really as part of that process, we realize, okay, so the biggest opportunity for making some improvements, because again, I think in your case and in our case, marketing, sales, and CS are all already using something, right? They already have processes in place. They have data that they're using, whether it's right or wrong. They have technology. When you start working with them, they might have 50 different pieces of software. By the time you're done, you might be down to 37 or whatever it is. But they all are starting with something. So I guess in our experience, it's typically works where, okay, let's dive in and get the sales team, up and running, knowing that at some point we need to connect marketing on the one end and CS on the other. But we don't sort of tackle it all at once unless there's a real need to do so.
Yeah, I think there's so many ways that you can tackle all of this work, right? So I think if we're getting to the same end result, then there's always there's so many nuanced ways to get there. And I think it probably also depends on the type of company and the size of the company and the complexity in the company too. So
absolutely, yeah.
Without a doubt, yeah.
Someone on my team, Xander, who actually we talked about Xander, right, Amy? He has like the "it depends" kind of neon sign behind him. And I mean, as consultants, obviously, we sometimes use it. Some consultants use it as a cop out, like, oh, it depends. I don't have the answer. But like, really, most of the times, it does depend on so much of the individual situation for each of our clients.
Well, if it's all right with you guys, I wouldn't mind switching gears a tiny bit to talk about implementing technology, because it sounds like for you guys, just like for us, a lot of what we're suggesting folks do is change their tech stack, streamline their tech stack, optimize it, start all over again. So what are the steps that you would walk a client through to help them evaluate what needs to happen with their tech stack?
I've mentioned the go-to-market ops side. We actually have a go-to-market ops framework that details out all of the components that our clients have from a process and data perspective. And we often will map their tech to that, so we can see for all of the core processes what tech are they using. So they might have marketing automation, CRM, automation tools, data enrichment tools. They might have, experience tools like webinar tools. They might have conversion tools like a Chili Piper or website conversion. They're going to have, a dozen or a few dozen tools across this that we're going to map onto there. And then we're going to try and see, okay, with the way that you've set everything up, from the integrations and the processes within these tools, like, where are the issues? And often, there's a lot of issues that you can fix within their existing tech stack for them to feel like and actually experience better ROI from their tech stack, as opposed to, ripping and replacing. As I've mentioned, kind of most of our clients, they have, and you touched on this, like, they have the core of their tech stack ready, so that they'll have Salesforce. Maybe some clients might not have marketing automation, so we'll be helping them implement Marketo or HubSpot. But a lot of times they already have that. So, but then when we look at the core processes and we're trying to build out, the life cycle and how the data is going to be moving through and getting updated through the core tech stack, there's often the pieces that might be missing, like data enrichment. They're like, okay, well, now we're going to have territories and we want to be able to do scoring based on different segments. And it's like, well, do you have the data? And they're like, no, we don't have the data. So okay, we're going to need to enrich this data somewhere to be able to get that. So you end up finding the gaps. But often, what happened over the last, particularly around like the early 2020s and maybe a couple of years before that, is every company went on a massive, buying spree of technology. We're kind of seeing it again now with AI tools. Interestingly, I thought every company learned their lesson during the crazy boom times. But so there's so much opportunity to remove the shelfware, right? So as we're going through, we hear it all the time. It's like, okay, they're like, oh, someone bought 6 cents, but I don't even know who bought it, and we've got it, and no one's using it, kind of thing. It's like, okay, well, are you going to renew this or are you not? Like, we can help you get the ROI out of this, but like, let's really figure out if you even have an ABM strategy to do it. So many companies, you've probably seen this, they put the tool before the strategy. It's like they didn't really know what they were going to do with it. They just wanted the tool. So then, once we've got a good understanding of the tech stack, all of the processes within the tools, we figured out how to just get, particularly from the core tech that you're probably not going to rip out, how to just get that working better. There is then the opportunity to then start pulling out and saving the client money because they've got a load of shelfware.
And an overlap of what the tools do. I think that's another thing that happens when you're just bolting on, is that like, oh, actually, we did have a tool that has this. They've added it to the roadmap or whatever it is. And now you don't need the two separate ones.
Yeah. And they probably bought all of the tools without even speaking to their ops team. It's like the marketing team, oh, we bought this tool, and they throw it over the fence to the marketing ops team. Like, can you implement this? Wait, it's like, I thought we had the tool that kind of did this. So yeah, it happens all of the time. And again, yeah, I saw some head nodding when I said it, but the new AI tool revolution here is adding a lot to people's tech stacks.
It's real.
Good and bad.
Happening.
Good and bad.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's it. Like figuring out where the shelfware is, getting the actual core tech stack working properly, and then figuring out where the gaps are.
Okay. So I guess the one thing that has come up a lot of times in these conversations is also identifying the specific problem that you're solving with the technology. So it sounds like there's a step back that you need to take with them too, and say, what was the problem that this solved? Is it still a problem? Has it been solved? And then go from there with simplifying, getting rid of some of the complexity.
Definitely. But often it is quite simple. The answer is like, someone just bought it, they don't work here anymore, and we don't know what we're doing with it. So it can actually be pretty simple. But when it is more, particularly with the more expensive technology, like we see it a lot with ABM tools, they're probably the biggest tool that I would say that people bought before having a strategy. They're like, I heard about ABM, I need to buy one of these tools, and they bought it, and then they're trying to figure out what to do with it when they had it. We always try and get our clients to figure out the business case way before you're signing that check, right?
Sure.
But like, if they've already done that before we work with them, then okay, let's try and figure out what that business case is, so then we can try and leverage this tool to then meet an objective here. But if we can't build out the business case after the fact, then let's not renew.
And so since these clients are with you on retainer, what does your process and your engagement look like with them ongoing, as far as like checking to see if the adoption is happening? Are the users doing what they've been asked to do? That sort of thing. How do you monitor that ongoing?
Yeah, I think I don't think enablement, it's never done. That's kind of where we come from. It's like, you might build a new process, implement a tool, train people on it. That doesn't mean you've done your job to help people adopt it, that one training you did, right? The enablement needs to be continuous, probably forever. Particularly a lot of the companies that we work with, their whole team could have turned over every year or two, like where they've got a whole new sales team or a whole new marketing team or a whole new ops team almost every year or two. So you need to make sure that for new people being onboarded, you've got a process for them to be able to be trained on what the core things they need to know. And that's not just only tool specific, that's process and the human element that they need to bring in to make sure everything's being tracked properly. But then making sure it's even baked into those tools now where you can have like all of the different enablement pieces baked into the platform, right? Where they have like the little hover over and it'll tell them to do something, or they can link out to different pieces of documentation. We're massive on documentation here. Xander just recorded a video for us all about how we help our clients document. Most of our clients, when we start working with them, there's like no documentation. So no one knows how anything's working. Where everything we build the document first before we even start like gathering requirements. Like get the document, and then we use this to gather requirements, and then we use this to then go through the whole life cycle of that project. So by the end, now we've got an enablement piece to help people. And I think adoption is all down to like people understand what you've built? Are they bought into it? Is it documented? Are they able to follow? Is the process simple enough for them to be able to follow? And if you have all of those things in place, then the adoption will be there. But these fast-growing SaaS companies, those things always get pushed to the side and not prioritized.
Well, I think it's true in a lot of industries. We just had an interview with an EOS implementer, and he said that process and specifically documenting them is something that nearly every organization struggles with.
Yeah,
for whatever reason.
I mean, my take is that it's because most people try to document after they've built something. Like they'll do the whole project, and then at the end they go, "Oh, I should document everything that I've done," and then they go, "But actually, I've got another important project that I should work on now. I don't have time to do that document." So with CS2, we say every project starts with a document and it ends with a dashboard. So first off, you get the document ready. Like I said, make sure you're using that through the other lifecycle and updating it. So when it comes to the end of the project, you don't have to go and do 5 hours documentation. It's just ready because it just got built while you were doing it. So I think most companies, if they adopted an approach like that, then they would probably get it done because it doesn't actually add any more time to what you're doing. But if you wait until the end, it's always going to get forgotten.
Well, especially if you're not actually the person who's building the process, you're going back and trying to document what has been done by someone previous, then woof.
Yeah, we do that a lot for clients when we're coming in. They'll just be like, "Oh, can you just help us understand how all of this is working?" So sometimes our projects are literally just to document for them what has been built. But that comes down to the turnover side, because probably the ops team is all brand new and they're just trying to figure out what's been built for the last 5 years that had been built by other people.
As you were talking, you were talking about how enablement is never done, and then you sort of talking about the training and onboarding and ultimately what adoption really means. But I'm guessing if enablement is never done, then adoption is never done either, because as long as you have new people coming who need to be trained and onboarded, etc., adoption is always kind of a moving target as well. So that's kind of built into your ongoing process of, so both enablement and adoption are kind of tied to the same process for you.
So everything we build, one day there's probably going to be someone new that isn't going to understand it when they started the company, right? And then so now they're going to be the new test case for, is it going to be adopted by them and continued to be sustained? So again, that's why we like to document, make sure we've got everything ready for them. I think it's also why I have a general opinion on operations along the same kind of idea as this, that operations shouldn't be thinking about stuff even as projects. In my mind, everything is more of a product development cycle with continuous improvement. And you build out a new life cycle tracking, you implement a new tool, you haven't finished that. There's going to be additional work that you need to put into it to kind of build on top of it or maintain it, or now someone's implemented a new tool and that's going to interact with what you've built previously, so you now need to update it. it's such a fluid process of continuous improvement, as opposed to we do a project, we enable everyone on it, now we're done, and then we move on to the next project. It's like, okay, we've built this feature, and that feature could be a new tool or a new kind of really big deployment or something. Now we need to make sure we're maintaining it for a long time. We're making sure that anything new that gets built around this that could interact with whatever this process is can take this into account. And that's why I think when our ideal approach to engage with our clients is on a continuous basis, because I just don't like it when we've ever done something like a project and we do a project for a client and then we leave, because you're just like, well, is this going to work or not? I can't be around to make sure it's going to work. And I think that's the mentality the internal ops people should have too, which is like, okay, if I'm building something, it doesn't matter if I'm a consultant externally or not. I need to make sure over time this is still people are doing what they need, people still have the right information, and I'm maintaining this. And that's why you've got to be so careful about what you build and new technology you adopt, because it never reduces the ops team workload. Everything you build is a new layer of maintenance that your ops team has to build. But I don't think executives understand that. They think, oh, we'll implement a tool that's going to make the ops team have less work to do. It's never been true. It will always add more work on a continuous basis. And that's why consultants are so valuable, because the internal team is completely stretched thin on the day-to-day and maintaining all these tools. And then consultants have to come in to help them actually progress forward and build new things.
And I suppose you could say the same thing for anyone in a RevOps function, right? Whether they're marketing ops, sales ops, CS ops, or RevOps, that every day that goes by where more data is being added, processes are evolving and having to be iterated, that just creates more complexity for them to be solving on an ongoing basis. So I think that's a really good point. Charlie, in the sort of process and documentation piece, which obviously is it sounds like an important part for you, both personally and at CS2. How do you sort of talk and think about the iteration of processes? So, because to your same to the point where you were saying, one of the first things you help do is make sure that the processes are created, and or created while the project is being done, so that the process is complete when the project is complete. But of course, as we all know, processes will also evolve because of continuous improvement. First of all, how do you do that? And secondly, what are some of the resistance that you get around the continuous improvement of processes, if any?
Well, first off, I think there's always a requirements gathering step, right? We're not just improving a process because we feel like it. There's got to be a reason why and a requirement. And often, so to your resistance question, there often isn't resistance because it's been the reason why we're even thinking about improving it is because maybe a salesperson is like, oh, I don't like the way I'm creating opportunities, or this process, it's hard to follow. Or a marketing lead is like, well, I'm trying to get this report, but sales are just creating opportunities the wrong way. So it's not being tied back to any of my marketing programs and campaigns. So there's always, a reason why you're doing it, which then, kind of makes the resistance point not less important, but maybe less of a hurdle. And then when you're going through the requirements gathering, that essentially is building a business case for the reason why you're making the change. But then to the resistance piece, there is always resistance to change, right? So sometimes like what the marketing leader wants isn't what the sales team wants to do. So then there's trying to navigate that. And sometimes that can honestly just be political, which sucks. But most of the time, to give everyone the benefit of the doubt, it is, marketing wants a clear view of what's working and not working. And to do that, there's a lot of kind of human steps that need to go in the right way, right? The way that the sales team operates in CRM. And then that adds a lot of work on the sales team's plate. And all they want to do is just close deals and not bother about, updating stuff in Salesforce. So there's always that trade-off. So you're trying to make it easy for them, And generally what we try and do is automate a lot of those steps through the sales process for them based on stuff that they're just already doing. Like if they're using a sales loft or an outreach engagement or a sales engagement tool, they're creating activities in Salesforce. We're trying to trigger off those and then capture the data that we need and move through the sales process so they can just work in their tool they're used to working in without actually having to go back and update statuses and do all these things. But I think there is the resistance, but I think the more that you can bring, that's kind of like back to one of my original points on when we start, we want to include the salespeople and the sales leadership at least in these conversations, because if you have them in the room when you're making these decisions, then the buy-in is kind of set there by default, as opposed to being like, okay, I worked on all of this with the sales team. Oh, sorry, the marketing team. Now, sales team, you got to go do this. And they're like, wait, where did this come from? But if they're part of the process, it makes it a lot easier. And if they understand why, because you've gathered the requirements the right way, then it makes it a lot easier.
Yeah, it answers the question of the why. And it's something we're doing for your benefit, for you and with you, not to you.
So it sounds to me, Charlie, like, but correct me if I'm wrong. So are you typically working with one sort of functional leader, so that you're being brought in either by a CMO or a VP of sales? You're not necessarily working cross-functionally at the leadership level, or
leadership meaning like CEO, or
yeah,
we're normally brought in by marketing leadership / sales leadership if they're both kind of on the same page about what they want to do. But based on our background and just a lot of the people that we know, usually it's on the marketing side. But then that's when we come in and say, well, we don't, based on what we just talked about, we don't want, if we're doing something that's going to impact the sales team, let's get them involved, right? So then they get brought into it, but not typically brought in by at the C level. But obviously they're approving the decisions of the CMO at that point, hopefully. So more on the marketing side.
Yeah, because what we've found over the last 4 years was that we're essentially selling to the entire C-suite because of the cross-functional nature. And I guess maybe one of the things that we're doing, and I'm not sure, maybe you are too, and let me know if you are, is so other than implementing their go-to-market or customer-facing systems, one of the biggest sort of additions to what we've been doing for the last 4 or 5 years is integrating it with their ERP or backend, which of course, and because CFOs are becoming, we're dealing, I guess, with more and more strategic CFOs. CEOs are getting very, very personally involved as really the sponsors of these massive change management or these sort of technology initiatives, whatever they call them in that organization, which of course is ideal that you have sponsorship from at the highest level. But because it's for a lot of these leadership teams, they haven't done something like this before, or maybe one of them has, but the rest haven't. We find ourselves having to really educate the entire C-suite about the value of what it is that we're doing, and it's which once you do that, I think it's really powerful because they all get what it is that we're all doing collectively, and it's going to benefit all of them because they have better visibility and their teams are all a lot more productive, etc.
Yeah, I mean, I think getting as many people in the C-suite bought in as possible is awesome. Obviously, I think it really depends on the size of the company for us. So maybe some of the smaller companies that are just maybe a few hundred employees, we're probably maybe interacting with like the CRO, the COO, maybe sometimes the CEO, CFOs obviously had to approve everything. Back in the day, like before tech, SaaS kind of went through kind of the last interesting downturn. The approvals were like pushed down the chain. A marketing ops person could sign off on like a $200,000 contracting agreement. Now, CFOs and everyone's getting a lot more involved. So yeah, we've seen probably over the last few years a lot more interaction with that group. But for our bigger clients, it's more. It isn't always at that level, right? The CEO probably isn't as interested in like how we're implementing HubSpot or something.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
And so it depends on the project. It depends on the size of client. But yeah, it's definitely probably gone in that direction more than it definitely was prior to 2022. But yeah, again, depends on the size.
Yeah.
So we're running close to time, and I want to make sure that we share some fun stories from I won't call them projects that you guys have worked on, but
You can call them projects.
it can get, and I'm sure you've experienced this as well, it can feel a little repetitive when we're having these conversations because organizations are all having the same challenges, feeling the same pain points, hitting the same roadblocks, et cetera, et cetera. So I would like to end on a positive note of once they've gone through all this work, once they've, had the business case lined out, the problem that they're going to solve is solved, the tech stack is not bloated, but does all the things that all the teams need, and you have visibility across the teams. What does that mean on the client side? What are they able to do for their businesses?
So they've gone through all the pain. And so, yeah, and what does it look like on the other side, kind of thing?
I mean, you touched on it when you said you always ask, I think, in your sales process, what reporting you're trying to get to. That is always kind of the not the last step, but that is kind of like where you're trying to head to, at least for a lot of the work that we're doing. A lot of companies and the leadership, they just want visibility into what's working, and they want to be able to make decisions. So when they can actually do that and they have reliable data, because the process, and we know on here and everyone else listening probably, it's a lot of work to get to that. There's a lot of processes and tech and a lot of kind of complexities you have to work through just to get reliable reporting. When they have that and they haven't had it, I mean, it's a game changer. They can actually make decisions.
Yeah. And they feel confident in those decisions.
Exactly. One of my clients, they gave me my new favorite term. It's called Excel Olympics, where they're pulling loads of data out of all these tools and they're trying to throw it in Excel. They're spending a week to get their board reports ready. And they're doing Excel Olympics to just try and get data. And every time they do it, they're doing it in a different way. So there's not a repeatable process. No one likes the data. And it's just a disaster. Once you work with someone who can actually get this built out properly, now you don't have to do Excel Olympics. You can actually just pull the report either out of your BI tool or out of your CRM. You can trust it. Everyone's on the same page. Alignment, marketing and sales aren't banging heads every day because everyone's pulling different reports, looking and thinking they've got the right data. So I mean, you can do it all in real time.
You can do it all in real time.
In real time, exactly. Yeah, it doesn't take 3 weeks to pull the board deck every quarter, which a lot of companies are doing that.
Which is. I mean, we actually hear that a lot, and it's too bad because I mean, Excel is an amazing piece of technology. But really, it's not meant to be used for the things that a lot of companies are using them for that we're talking about here. Charlie, I guess one question. I noticed you posted something yesterday, which I just saw the quote, and I wanted to maybe get a little bit of a background on this one. So you wrote, as a CMO, if you don't get the right data and measurement in place, you're essentially signing your own death certificate.
I mean, it wasn't my quote. So yeah, go ahead.
Yes. No. So, and I didn't read the rest of it. But what's behind that quote?
So I had a call with someone, Lindsay. She let me actually use her, name, and so I mentioned her in that post. She's been a CMO twice, and now she's a consultant, fractional CMO. And she just said that quote as we were talking. We were thinking about maybe how we could work together, and she is very conscious of the fact that a CMO can't be successful if you don't have the right measurement and data, right? I mean, why does a company bring in a CMO? To come in and make decisions, right? They're not building the stuff on the ground level. They're there to just direct the team. And if they don't have data to be able to do that, and there's so much pressure on the CMO, like in 3 months, you've got to have pipeline doubled. You've got to be like closing revenue. And it's like, okay, well, how do I even allocate, my millions of dollars? Like one CMO actually that I won't say the name, but she started a new company. I think they're maybe a couple $100 million in revenue, and they were spending $1 million a month on ads. And the first question was like, is any of this turning into pipeline? And none of the team could answer that. So how can a CMO be successful and not just kind of get an early exit when they don't know, should I invest more in ads? This could be the best thing that we're doing. Or should I just completely stop it because no one can say whether this is actually working or not because they don't have the data. So I think that quote just hit me so hard when she said it. I even asked on the call, can I use this as a quote? Because it really is signing your own death certificate if either the company hasn't got the measurement in place before a CMO starts, or if it isn't, top 3 priority once a CMO starts. Because 6 months in, companies asking you to make these decisions and make things better, don't have the data. I mean, you're not going to be making anything better, are you?
And would you say that would be the same for CMO in any industry?
I don't know. I'm so
That's specific
in SaaS.
to SaaS. Yeah. So she's also in SaaS.
Yes, is that yeah. Everything I'm said on this podcast is very specific to SaaS. Hopefully, it applies to other industries.
I think it absolutely does. I think that applies to other roles as well, not just a CMO, but a leader who has to come in and help a company get to this new inflection point, or turn something around that's gone horribly awry. I think you're exactly right. Like if you don't have the tools to say, like, here's where we can get some quick wins and kind of prove that it was worth them bringing you on, then that's a tough spot.
Yeah, but I guess what I see in for example the AEC industries is we're talking more and more to a leader of strategy and or innovation, not the CMO, because the CMOs in those organizations are really, really focused on brand and content and stuff like that. They're not necessarily data-driven CMOs.
I would say maybe SaaS definitely has that, but there has been definitely since in the last maybe 5 or more years, a lot more CMOs kind of growing up through kind of more of like the demand gen or like the pipeline generating aspects of marketing, as opposed to just like brand or product. There are still those that are in that kind of where they're less focused on the measurement, less focused on pipeline, more focused on brand. But I would say it's a trend that has been pretty strong, at least from what I see.
Yeah, no, I would agree. I'm just wondering whether that'll happen. Because I think any business or in any industry that's not data driven today is playing at a huge disadvantage.
How you would operate, right? Like, how can you operate without data? Because you just can't make a decision, particularly when you're trying to deploy tens of millions of dollars of marketing budget. I mean, if you don't have any data to base that on, you're just guessing.
Or you could just do what Peter Drucker did. Yeah. Know what 50% of it's doing, and don't worry about the other 50%.
Right? Yeah.
No, I mean, that was a joke, but yeah.
I mean, getting to 50% is better than 0% of knowing what's happening. So that could at least be like the first step. But I think he had the quote of what gets measured gets managed, right? So if you can't set goals for your team because you can't measure anything to say if they've achieved those goals or not, then your team's flying blind too, and they're just like doing stuff, being busy, but you don't know if you're actually impacting anything when it comes to pipeline and revenue. So and then you're not motivating them to try and achieve the goals because you're not holding anyone accountable. So, I mean, that's a big part of data, right? Holding people accountable. And if you don't have it, then people aren't accountable. I'm not saying people are lazy, but they'll just kind of feel like just do stuff because it feels good, as opposed to do stuff that's actually moving the needle.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And people need to know what winning looks like, because we've grown up keeping score on everything. So it makes sense if you can translate that into your work. If you know what winning looks like, and therefore how it's measured, that's going to make everybody, you'd think, set them up for more success.
Yeah, I mean, so many people outside of marketing think of marketing as the people that keep the swag cupboard tidy and choose the colors. But if you're trying to get a seat at the table as a marketer, you've got to be data driven. You've got to prove your impact on pipeline and revenue and show that you're making a meaningful impact on the true metrics the business cares about. So if you aren't able to tell that story because you don't have the data, then you're going to really suffer as a marketer in this day and age, for sure.
Yeah, build the story around the data, and then you'll be successful. Did you enjoy this episode?
Find more at RevOpsChampions.com.